Back, Plant Boss here, coming to you live from McCord's Gardens here in Pueblo, Utah. Today's topic is how to prune roses. Very, very practical. So if you just have your attention for a few minutes, you're going to learn how to do something really good for roses. So what you will need basically are pruning shears and gloves, of course, to protect yourself from the thorns. And then also at the end, we're going to talk just a little bit about fertilizers and things that can protect roses from insects. So, first thing to remember is when you prune rose blooms, you do that throughout the season to keep the rose healthy and also to keep it flowering and to keep it looking nice. So those are our three goals with this. First thing you need to remember is the rule of thumb. Depending on the number of leaflets that is on the rose leaf, 3 or 5, you're going to come down from a dead bloom 3 to 5 growth nodes. Let me show you what I mean. On this one, we see that we've got about 5 leaflets. So what that means is on this rose, where we have the dead blooms, we're going to come down 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 leaflets and cut just above the growth node here. And from where that leaf joins the rose cane, you will get a new growth of blossoms coming out from there. So it will bud from that growth node. And you just continue doing that. Oops, we've got one coming out there already, so we'll cut that. And then we'll come down here, and again, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and we'll cut like that. In general, you want to cut at an angle so that the higher end of the angle is above the growth node. The reason for that is it allows the sugars from the cane to come up into the growth node and spur on that new growth. Once you're done, the rose will look absolutely beautiful. All of those dead blossoms and rose hips will be off of the rose, and it'll be really, really nice to look at again. It will also encourage new growth, both foliage and buds for flowers to come out. Now this is a David Austin shrub rose, which we do grow here at McCord's. Since we're coming to the end of the season, we're just about out of these English roses, but they have wonderful scents and are really, really great for gardens here in Utah. Now, once you're done pruning that rose, and it looks all nice and neat again, you also want to make sure that if you have anything that has died off in the rose, you cut that out too. So here we have part of the cane that started to die. We're going to cut that out right above the next growth node, just like that. And that way we keep all of the dead growth out of there, and it allows the air to circulate within the bush. Finally, you need to remember that when we prune roses and do our major pruning, that happens early in the early spring. And by that I mean usually the last week of February, first week of March. That way we get rid of all of the old cane from the previous years, and it causes a new growth to come out on the rose bush and look beautiful for the rest of the season. So remember that. Last week of February, first week of March, we do a major pruning to the roses. You're going to cut 2/3 of the bush down if it's a tea or a shrub rose. Also too, it depends on what your goals are as an individual. If you want to leave the shrub rose nice and bushy, you don't have to cut that much off, but usually it's recommended to cut about 2/3 of the rose back. Now, I wanted to talk really quick about a couple of ways that you can keep the rose healthy with fertilizer, but also especially with certain insecticides that will keep things like aphids and spider mites off the rose, but also will be a low impact to the ecology of the rose garden itself. If you're not into natural gardening, I do recommend a systemic for roses. It just makes things a little bit easier. If you use a spray systemic, which I kind of discourage, you need to spray after the sun sets and the good insects go home. We don't want to hurt our bees. But you can also get a granular systemic. You just place 1/4 cup of the granular systemic around the base of the rose bush. It also is accompanied with a fertilizer, just the right ingredients to keep the rose bush growing very, very well. And then the systemic is absorbed through the root system into the rose, and it emits it through the respiratory system of the rose. Now keep in mind, systemics are still a low impact to natural predators and good insects. That doesn't mean that there isn't some negativity to that. So you need to do a little research on that. What I've read and learned is about 0.02% of a systemic can be ingested by the larger good insects. So, but if you are concerned about that, you don't need to use a systemic. You can use something like diatomaceous earth, which is spread around the rose and will keep the creepy crawlies off of it. Or you can use a product, an all-natural product, like neem oil, and spray the rose with that. That will help with the little aphid and spider mite critters that might cause the blooming to stop and suck the life out of the rose. Finally, the last thing I can recommend is an old grandma solution that my grandmother taught me, about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of Dawn dish soap to a quart of water. You can spray that on roses, and what that does is it will clog the respiratory systems of the insects, and they basically suffocate from something like that. That's all I have for you folks today. If you have any questions, you're always welcome to contact us here at McCord's or your local garden center. Have a great afternoon, and thanks for tuning in on this episode for Roses.